Rosie, hi, welcome to the Female Startup Club podcast.
Yay, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here and to hear all about your brand. I was just saying to you before we started recording that this is probably one of the first times we've had a fragrance founder on the show. And I'm so excited to dig into how you actually go about creating a fragrance brand and what that journey looks like. But before we jump into it, could you give us a bit of an overview or an elevator pitch, if you will, into you, your brand, and the ethos behind it?
So I am Rosie Jane. I am the founder of By Rosie Jane. We are a clean beauty fragrance. I like to say lifestyle brand as well, because I feel like that's really what we stand behind. We are all about easy, everyday, transparent, authentic, beautiful products. That's kind of everything that stands for By Rosie Jane. Really simple.
And it's so beautiful. I love your design and your overall aesthetic. It's really nice. I know that you have had quite the journey to getting to where you are today, and you've launched multiple brands under kind of your namesake brand. And I'd like to kind of go back to the very beginning of where you like to start your story and where you like to kick things off, which I'm guessing is like pre 2002, maybe?
Oh man, yes. I feel like yeah, I feel like I'm like a dinosaur in the entrepreneurial world nowadays, especially now the way that brands are built and they grow really really fast and then they sell and then we're an like an older brand in the sense that I launched. So my original product, I'm a makeup artist by trade. That's sort of where I started everything. It's where I fell in love with beauty. It's where I fell in love with the way that products can make you feel. But then I'm going to say it would have been like around 2002, 2003, I launched this cheek and lip gloss. And it was the very first product that I ever did. Clearly, I was a makeup artist. I had been putting lip gloss on the cheeks of my clients for what felt like an eternity, because I love the dewiness that is now very on trend, right? Everyone has, but I didn't.
Very Glossier.
Very Glossier, but I didn't want the shimmer, which is what I did, like that kind of buildup that it would give on the skin. I love the translucent feel that lip gloss did. So I created a cheek and lip pot, and people were like, I'm sorry, I don't really understand what you mean. It's like a cream, but it's sort of dewy. Now people would be like, yeah, dude, this is a no-brainer.
I love things that are 2 for 1.
Yeah, they're like, I'm sorry, I feel like this product's been done 10,000 times. But when I launched it,
you're ahead of your time.
People were really kind of taken back by it. It was different. So, but that's really where I started my whole entrepreneurial journey. We got this really amazing cult following behind it. We were just, Rosie Jane was my name, the brand name then. And yeah, I was still doing makeup and I was selling this little cheek and lip pot into boutiques. And that is really how it all began. I kind of got the bug then.
And so what happened with it?
We launched we were in a bunch of stores in Sydney. So I was still living in Australia at the time. And then I'm trying to remember. I came to the US and we started to get like a little bit of like a following here. We launched into a very trendy store at the time called Satine, which was on 3rd Street, which very kind of funky part of town. Friend of mine was a stylist, and she was the buyer, and she was like, I'm obsessed with your cheek and lip pots and I want to put them in there. So I found these little tiny stores and then kept kind of growing from there, all the time doing makeup. And then it really was this very organic growth. But then the crash of 2008 came, right? So I was never fully supporting myself doing the cheek and the lip. It was more makeup. I was doing both of them together. And then, I think we probably had about 100 little tiny boutiques, and I would call, and the orders were so teeny. So we would call and be like, I would call like every day around to stores and be like, hi, I have a new product. Would you like to try it? I would love to, send you a sample? And they would say yes. And then I would send it and they would order like 5. We had 3 colors. They would do like 3 of each color maybe and a tester. And then I would call them kind of monthly to be like, hey, do you need a reorder? Do you need new testers? Can you do this? Can you do that? But I had no real idea of marketing. I had no idea of education. So we had this new product, a new concept, and people loved it. And we got so much press. We were written up in Allure. We were written up in InStyle. And it was me literally packing these little boxes and tying hand-tied bows around each box.
Mm-hmm. Very bootstrapped, grassroots.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had when we very first launched, I remember we had this like tying party. So I invited all of my friends to come over to our house in Paddington, where I grew up in Sydney. And there was like 10 of us, and we all sat around a table and hand tied all of these boxes.
Founders, take note. Get your friends over, rope them in.
Yes, I had to supply a lot of wine, I remember, and food, and that was about it. That's all it took.
It's all we need.
And good conversation. And then we tied, we probably didn't actually get very many done, but my mom was a bit of a champion at the tying of the bows. They were so perfect. But it really was a very kind of side hustle thing. It didn't, I knew I wanted to do something that was different and made a difference and felt good. But I don't think I was picturing too far down the track. It was just, everything was just right now. Oh, a new store here, a new store there. It was kind of crazy.
And so 2008 rolls around. My thought process here around 2008, or my assumption, is similar to COVID. This thing happens, everything goes to kaput, and all the stores that you're stocked in close. Is that what happened?
Pretty much. At the time, though, of course, we didn't have these online channels. We lost probably 80% of our stores. So the difference is that there were still people who could fight through, whereas I feel like with COVID, with the brick and mortar, there was no one could survive that period if you only had brick and mortar. It was mandatory closing. This was kind of survival of the fittest, right? It was brutal, but everyone was closing doors. That was our only outlet. We did not have a website. We didn't have anything at the time. I know it seems so crazy. So it pretty much killed 85% of my business. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, okay, well, that's done. I mean, thank God for makeup. I guess this is what it is. And then randomly, this girlfriend of mine, who was a colleague who also had a beauty line at the time, was like, have you ever thought of doing fragrance?
And this is still 2008, or is this kind of like a few years down the track?
It was
establishing a timeline over here.
Yeah, it was 2008 that when it came up in conversation. So, and I was like, no, like, why would, and this is where it was sort of this weird synchronicity is I had a fragrance that I had mixed for myself as a makeup artist and wore as like my signature calling card, right? So I had always had this kind of, but when she was like that, I was like, no, dude, why? I would never do perfume. Like, I'm not a perfumer. That seems insane. And that kind of started everything rolling for me.
She planted the seed.
Yeah. And then when, people were sort of, the education behind what I had done with the cheek and lip just was challenging. It was, beautifully packaged. I had done all of this really great work, but I didn't understand, as I said, the marketing. I didn't understand the full idea of selling this product out into the market. I think that's what it was. Even though we had great press, we had great, I was competing also at a time where in the idea of an indie cosmetic line was like, I'm sorry, what are you talking about?
Different world.
Yeah, it just
pre-social media,
it wasn't really taken seriously. It was sort of taken like I was, mixing the product in my kitchen and pouring these little pots where, we worked with a manufacturer. We did all of these things. It was small and teeny, but it was legitimate, and it wasn't sustaining in the way that I would have needed to create this big line. So yeah, so that sort of, it was crazy. That in order for that to happen kind of pushed me into the world of fragrance.
That's so crazy. I'm interested to know like how you kind of wrapped that up and then got into 2.0 by Rosie Jane and actually got started. Like, you know, are you sitting there being like, oh, I'm going to mix some fragrance in my kitchen today and see what happens? Or are you like going straight out to a manufacturer who, you know, is a perfumer? What's that transition? How do you get from A to B?
So I had this fragrance that I had worn for a long time. And clients of mine would ask me, oh, it's beautiful. I love it. Can you mix it for me? And then I think from Lucy was her name, who planted the seed kind of for me.
Shout out to Lucy.
And then for it to actually become like a real idea, it took another friend of mine being like, will you make the fragrance that you wear for me? Make me like 5 little bottles. She had a boutique on a very kind of funky area in LA called Larchmont Boulevard. And she was like, I'm obsessed with this fragrance. Can you make it for me? And I want to stick it and put it in my shop over the holidays. And I was like, sure. So I made 6 little bottles, and I had this old typewriter that I bought from a garage sale, and I hand typed, the fragrance, and I had to name it.
Love it. Very Le Labo.
Right? It looked exactly like Le Labo. And I had to name it at the time. Of course, I had my daughter, Layla. So originally it was called Layla. That's all. It was not Layla Lou. So I typed Layla, and then I was like, it would look weird to say Layla Rosie Jane. So I was like, Layla by Rosie Jane. That's it. That was it. We glued it onto the bottle, cut it out, and gave her the bottles, and she sold out in like a week. I was like, she's like, can I have more? And I was like, yeah, all right. I mean, and so I already, having had the cheek and lip, I already understood the process of how to kind of get into stores and do all that. And then I was like, you know what? And I was still doing the cheek and lip on the side. It was still going. It was just much smaller. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this I'm going to add it to the line. I'm going to call all the existing stores that we have, tell them we're doing a fragrance. I'm not going to hand type these labels. I'm going to print some stickers. But at the time, I went to a friend of mine. This is so crazy. And I was like, I don't have any money to do the packaging. So I can't afford to do a box. The bottle's fine. I can get stickers. But, to do the box and kind of design it and make it look beautiful, will you lend me, no joke, like $2,000? And I'll give you, this is where the universe is so brilliant. And I was like, I'll give you like 20% of the company if you give me $2,000 to do the boxing.
Whoa.
Oh my God.
Best deal ever for her.
He said no.
No, or him.
He said no. It was a guy. He was like, can I do this? Is where it's so crazy when you're young and you're broke. And he was like, I don't know if the company, if I trust you, and I think that you're smart. I think you're all those things. But honestly, it was something like, I think your husband borrowed like $500 from me like a year ago, and he never paid me back. So, I don't think my wife is going to let me give you any more money.
Oh, thank God.
Thank God. Oh my God. It's literally one of those moments where
that would have been the best deal ever for him.
Oh my, we joke about it now. We're still friends with these people. And I'm always like,
he's like, damn it.
I'm like, thank God you had no foresight and no trust. Thank God. Because literally I was just like, I can't do it. So
what did you do? How'd you get the $2,000?
I did no packaging. I just did the bottle and I just did the sticker, and I had this little paper hang tag, and we did no boxing, and it was just the bottles, and they would sit. And I was like, you know what? This is actually probably a really like more of an eco-friendly way anyway to do it.
100%. That's so cool. My goodness. So you launch this new fragrance line. Well, you launch a very small fragrance offering of the one scent that you have. What is that first year like? Obviously, you said in the first kind of go of 1.0, the cheek and lip gloss, you didn't know how to market, you weren't sure like how to kind of the vision, etc. What changes in 2.0? How do you start actually getting this out there to, I mean, you're in 100 stores before. That's kind of crazy to me. 100 stores is a lot of stores. So how do you grow this and kind of nurture it into something a lot bigger?
Again, I think for me, it was a kind of organic growth. So I think we had probably like 40 stores left at that time, where I was like, hey, we have a new fragrance. I'll send you a sample. Luckily, this fragrance, Le Lelou, is intoxicating, right? It literally is like one of those. If I had a plan to make a fragrance as popular as Le Lelou, I don't think I could have accomplished it. It was just one of those sweet kind of moments that it just came together, and I happened to mix a fragrance that people loved. So that fragrance it sold itself. I would send it to people and they'd be like, I love it. Great. I'm taking 10 bottles, and it would sell out. And then, so it was having gone from a product where people were like, oh, I don't think they understand, or, it felt sticky when they first put it on, or blah, 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 to a product that pretty much just sold itself with no real explanation.
Product market fit. I think that's what they call it now.
Yeah, it just, and we weren't doing eau de parfum because I didn't understand how the alcohol thing worked. So I was just doing pure oil. But it really was this kind of just crazy experience. And then I'm very tenacious, and I worked the shit out of that product and my sales channels. I rang I'm talking like I would ring like 150 stores a day. Hey, I have a new product. Hey, I have a new product. I want to send you samples. I want to send you samples. I mean, I was like dogmatic about it, and I would like find brands that I loved, that I knew were sort of boutiquey, and not perfume brands, but more like clothing brands, t-shirt brands. At the time, it was like Splendid or Ella Moss or whatever. And I would find out all the stores that they were sold in, and I would call those stores. That's how I would find them. And so I would just ring and be like, I know that this is kind of the store. This is the sort of fashion that I would wear. Obviously, I made the fragrance, so it probably is going to resonate with people who also shop there. And that's how I continue to grow and grow and grow that way. And then we had great sell-through. So the product sold itself, but, I was just die hard to get it into these stores.
Did you need to invest any capital in those early years to develop the product that you were sending to these stores? And how were you thinking about working capital and the money piece of the puzzle?
When I became By Rosie Jane, no capital, obviously, because I couldn't even get $2,000. When I started my original company, I borrowed money from my dad. Or asked him for money. I mean, you say borrow with your parents. I never really paid him back. I never did.
How much are we talking?
I started with $10,000, and then incrementally probably went up to like 50. And that is because I think what happened, the difference between the two was with the cheek and lip gloss, there had to be like someone filling and pouring this product for me. It wasn't something that I could do at home. I designed and created packaging for it. I sort of had like a marketing plan. I wanted a publicist to help me launch it. So there was some initial things that I started with for that company that I didn't with the second company, which was kind of crazy. So, but it was more sort of dollars, right? So I would do it gave me $10,000 was like the biggest lump sum. And then the rest, I feel like, just sort of trickled in. Like I was like, no, hey, can you help me pay my publicist this month? Can you buy me a computer? Can I get that as a business? It was sort of more like that, as opposed to here's my business plan. Here's, money and run.
Got it.
Like, and it was different in those. I did letterhead, for Christ's sake. I printed you had to have, that you just didn't print stuff like that from the computer. It was so crazy when I did the cheek and lip in like 2002 or whatever it was. it was, you had MySpace was how I was talking about. And I think my like 11-year-old sister at the time set up MySpace for me.
Oh my God. Wow, MySpace. We're really going back a while here.
Well, this is the thing. It's
MySpace Tom. Gosh.
It was such a different time, and the elements that you needed to start a business were completely different to what they are now. So that was my startup capital.
Shout out to your dad. Funding the biz. Love that for you. So now, I mean, you're stocked in the likes of Sephora, you're stocked in the likes of Mecca, you're stocked in all these amazing companies, you're doing all these things. When it's come to your marketing and to getting to this point, if you were to distill kind of a couple of your major milestones, whether they were good or bad, but over the years, getting from, those early years of you making 150 phone calls every single day and just like pounding the pavement to today, what's been that journey in the kind of like dot point summary?
Oh gosh. So I think that the big jumps for me came with retail partnerships, right? So the people that I ended up getting recognition from, whether that be press or whatever. But for me, the jump from being just like little Rosie Jane in a couple boutiques was, Henri Bendel's, which is not the same as it was. So there was a huge, if you could get a trunk show at Henri Bendel, it was like a game changer for your brand. And I got one. And it was because, again, I would ring them, like I would stay up until 3:00 in the morning in Australia and call Henri Bendel's, the buyer, over and over, and because they never pick up their phone. And I knew that if I left a message, they would never call me back because they'd be like, "Who the fuck is By Rosie Jane?" Right? So I would just call, and then if I got the voice message, I would hang up, and then I would try like maybe an hour later, until I got, and then she picked up the phone, and I was like, "Oh hi, I'm Rosie. I would love to do it," and I was calling from Sydney. She's like, "Great, well, I'd love to meet you and get samples. Are you going to be in New York?" And I was like, "Yes, I am. Where I'm going to be in New York I'd try and plan it." And then I would be like, and then I would just set up all these meetings while I was there. And I would do it. I did it with Barney's. I did it with Henri Bendel's. And Henri Bendel was like, "You know what? We'll give you a shot."
And what was the impact of that?
I think what it had is it wasn't massive for sales, but what it did is let other people in the industry sort of, because they're always shopping Henri Bendel's, right? So they were kind of coming in to be like, what's new, what's cool. I mean, they were at the time the place to be discovered as a brand. It was like if Henri Bendel took you, people were like, "Oh shit, this is like legitimate, like this is going to be the next big thing." So when I got that trunk show, it was huge. That was sort of our jump. Although financially, can I tell you, it didn't ever feel like amazing at any particular point where I was like, whew, now I'm, I'm in, financial freedom ever with the brand.
Was there a point where you were able, what point rather, were you able to start paying yourself a salary and kind of take money out of the business?
I only stopped doing makeup. I've been a makeup artist this whole time in 2018. So we launched into Sephora in 2018. And that is when, that was, obviously a huge game changer again for us. And that is when I was like, okay, you know what? I have to stop doing makeup, leave my clients and go all in. Even though I was all in for, much way before 2018, I never felt like I had the confidence to just give up that income. And then in 2018, I was like, I just have to. It's not fair to the clients that I'm working for because I was there like doing their makeup and I was like looking at my phone like, "I'm sorry, I have to go. I have a meeting. I'm so sorry. I have to do this," and I was, Sephora is such an incredible company to work with. But they ask a lot. It's a lot of time, a lot of energy. And, I'm growing a brand, on a scale that I had just never done before. So I had to give my all into everything.
Do you have any tips for founders who are listening who, are dreaming of getting into Sephora? What do you think was working in your favor and got you in the door?
Innovation. That's the biggest thing. We got into Sephora primarily because finally clean products, right, became a thing. And so we had been clean and non-toxic since the beginning, really. Well, I hand mixed and it was not, right? And that's sort of opened up this can of worms for me with clean fragrance. And then we became fully clean like we are today in, oh gosh, I mean, so far, it feels like a million years ago. Probably 2010 when we officially launched, we were 100% clean. But again, people were like, clean? They kept thinking natural, right? Oh, you're an essential oil brand. I'm like, no, we're not, 100% natural. We use naturals, but we are clean. We don't use phthalates. We don't use hormone interrupters. We comb our ingredients. You can read our ingredients. A little bit of that education from my past days where people were like, I don't get it. Okay, I'm just going to call you natural. And you're like, okay, it's not really what we are, but if it makes you feel good, go crazy. So I think for us, the Sephora, I had pitched Sephora before and they were like, no, we'd never really gotten too far in. And then I started to look into clean in a whole new way through skincare primarily. And they reached out to us and were like, hey, would you be interested in sending your product into Sephora? And I was like, yes. Oh my God, it was so crazy.
Yeah, hell yeah. I love that also, like, for me, what stands out about you is that you're someone that is relentless in the pursuit of getting what you want. And also along that notion of like, no now doesn't mean a no forever. And it's just about being like open for when the no is a yes.
I think, and what's crazy is that I think that that's where your courage, your conviction is, right? That's where it comes back to. If you are not doing something that you truly believe in, that you truly love, you're not going to stay the course, right? And that is such an important part of it. And whatever that is, right, for you, that is what has to be your driving force. You're like, no, I know I can do this. I know this is a great product. I know that I'm going to, this is better than what's on the market, whatever it is. That's what has to drive you. But there is something within your entrepreneurial spirit, it's like nature versus nurture, right? It's just in you. There's also, it's like a competitive sports person. They have a level of competitiveness and drive that makes them untouchable, right? And it's why they do the crazy shit that you're like, I could never do that. I mean, could I play basketball? Absolutely not, right? Ever in my life or any major sports. But, if I can see something that I want, I will hammer away.
And it also goes back to that, like, that saying, it takes 10 years to reach overnight success, because everyone just wants everything to happen immediately. But really, like, everything does take time, and you really do have to have that persistence and that, like, true conviction in what you're doing, because 9 times out of 10, yes, there's always the rare outlier that pops on TikTok and it grows immediately overnight. Fine, sure. But also that person has still been hustling for, the years in the lead up to figure out their pathway. And there has been something that's come, beforehand. So it's interesting.
There's this, my mom would always say it to me. I don't actually know where it would come from. And which was this saying, which is you either pay your dues in the beginning or you pay them at the end, but everyone pays them. So even if you have massive growth, like realistically, you're like, hey, I just talked about a hairbrush, right? And you're like, got a lot of celebrity status, you got a lot of pull, and it climbs massively and everyone's going to buy it. At some point, business nous and real marketing and a really good product and all of these things are going to come into that. They may not come into it right at the beginning and but then suddenly you're going to hit this plateau and people are going to be like, actually, this product isn't great. Why do I want it? Do I want to buy another one? Am I ever going to tell anyone else about it? and then it just dies, right? So
Totally. The true test. Are you going to tell a girlfriend about it, and are you going to buy it twice?
exactly, right? So, and that's the thing. It's like, I think that legacy brands overall, if you look at most of them, have these incredible whys, generally, why they started, why they're doing what they're doing. They have a lot of struggle in the beginning. And because they've had to change and move with the times and manipulate and have massive failures and have great successes and still come back and fight and push forward. And those are so important to have in entrepreneurial world.
100%. I wanted to ask you about something you have on your website to see how it's going, what's the impact been, and that's your $25 sample tester kit. I was reading through your reviews, and it sounds like this has been just a great place for people to kind of discover the brand in an easy way. So I'd just love to kind of talk about this as a concept and as a marketing initiative and what it's been like.
Yeah. So, one of the biggest challenges for fragrance is online, is smelling it, of course, right? So I feel like it's really, most people don't buy fragrance blind unless it's like something that they know, like a Chanel No. 5, where it doesn't even matter if they like it. They just want Chanel No. 5 on their dresser. But it was one of the huge challenges for fragrance and selling online. So it was something that we did actually a really long time ago. And initially we offered them for free. We were a little tiny brand, and I was like, hey, if you want to like sign up, we'll send you a free sample. We only had one or two fragrances at the time. And then as we started to look at it, I was like, you know what, this is a really great way. Now we're a collection line, to have the experience of fragrance in your own home, in your own life, be able to give people enough product in each of these that they can really live in the fragrance for a week, because fragrance is so subjective. It not only impacts your life, it impacts the life of people around you, right? Your animals, your partner, your work environment, all of these things are impacted by a fragrance. So it's so important to be able to try them and bring them home and have this beautiful experience with a brand and a fragrance that is memorable. And that's really how it evolved into these sample sets, which is now our number one marketing tool. Absolutely.
And from like the kind of economics of this as a channel to acquire new customers, are you kind of positioning it as like a break even? Is it a loss, but then you make it up, because you see that people do come back and buy the full product? Or like, how do you map it out?
Yeah. So it's probably all said and done like a break even for us, but it is such a great marketing tool. And we are constantly acquiring new customers, right? That's how we're finding people. That's how people are discovering us. And what's cool is that they have this sort of physical object. So even if it's like something that maybe isn't for them, they give it to someone else. So they're like, it's like paying it forward. That it always ends up in the hands of someone that loves it. Even if they're like, I hate this fragrance, I gave it to my mom or my sister or my cousin or whatever, that person. And the crazy stories of how we hear from our customers of how they found us. It's so many like that. They were like,
I actually read that in some of the reviews, someone being like, either I gave it to someone who loved it, or I received it from someone and I loved it and then I bought it. Like you've got like hundreds or maybe thousands actually of 5-star reviews of people saying, these funny little stories about how they came across the tester pack. It's very cool.
And word of mouth is nothing more than you take to heart than your closest girlfriend or family member being like, oh my God, you have to try this product. It's so amazing. Or this is a brand that I love because of XYZ, and this is what they're doing. You've got to try their product. So yeah, we're working on a new one actually, because we have a new fragrance coming out in the fall. But yeah, I spend so much time in design on this because I want it to feel like this true experience of not only the fragrance, but of who we are as a brand, what we stand for, what means something to us. We're very much about community building, community give back, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about your community give back. I read that you had partnered with, I'm not sure how to say it properly. Lava May.
Oh yeah! Oh my gosh! They were. God, this is again years ago, and I just found them randomly online, and I loved everything that they were doing, which was providing. Well, they always say providing dignity, right, to people who find it or are finding it harder to find. So yeah, they were redoing all of these old buses to be mobile shower stations for the homeless and people who couldn't, otherwise have opportunity to just experience hygiene, like general hygiene. It was just so they were amazing. And now I think they have like 250 buses. We helped them finance their first bus, I think it was. We did a fundraiser, just little. We gave a percentage of our sales at the time. Honestly, it probably didn't really pay for anything now when I think of the amount of money that we donated, but I just thought it was such a brilliant concept. And
that is so cool. I love that. What's on the cards for you? What's next? What can you shout about?
Oh gosh. So, we recently got into body and personal care. So, we have a new fragrance coming out, but our big kind of push is much more into personal care, personal experience through beautiful products. And then we're launching with one of our new favorite retailer, which is 13 Lune. We're an ally brand for them. They are a new beauty retail concept going into all of the JCPenney stores. And they're about diverse, inclusive beauty, a lot of female founders, which is amazing, but really just about people doing something different, talking to a different, community, a different market, and really sort of broadening everything out in a really exciting way.
Congratulations. Sounds very exciting.
Thank you. I'm really excited. It was founded actually by a girlfriend of mine. We started our brands together, what feels like a million years ago. Her name is Nikeo. She had a coffee body scrub, which is amazing. But her and I would go to Fred Siegel, to the buyers, and be like, hey, would you want to take our product? We've known each other since then. And then now to both be doing this collaboration, it feels amazing. Just so amazing.
That's so cool. We'll have to get her on the show.
Oh my God, she's the most phenomenal. And talk about, tenacity. Holy shit. We literally, her and I were I remember she was bigger than me at the time as well. And we were still just mixing stuff in our kitchens, and it was just pushing a boulder up a freaking mountain.
The story of every entrepreneur's life.
Oh my God. It's just, yes. But and you don't ever feel like you get to the top. That's what's so crazy, I feel like, about entrepreneurship. Every person I speak to, whether or not they're in the billions or, in the hundreds, they never feel like they've ever stopped pushing that boulder.
Amen. What do you think is important advice for entrepreneurs in the beauty / fragrance space?
Honestly, I think start small is always the greatest thing you can do. Really have a clear idea of what you want to create and why you want to create that. There is so much saturation in the market right now within beauty, particularly skincare, but every element, color, fragrance. I think there really has to be a strong why. What am I doing this for? Why does this product matter? I think you can, if you want to be an entrepreneur and you're not really sure where you want to put your stamp on things, in which market, that's the most important thing to find. Don't just bring out a product for the hell of it, because now it's too competitive. There's so much out there. And the one thing we're actually missing, I think, is innovation. We're not seeing as many brilliant breakthroughs in new products at the moment. A lot of it's just the same. So I just think, sit with it for a minute, and be like, okay, is what I am currently doing, is it just another thing on the market, or is it something that really is going to make an impact in someone's life environmentally, personally, what have you?
Yeah. Is there a true point of difference? What's the difference?
Yes. And those differences can be teeny, right? Like they really can, but something that just feels like this is what I want. And it can also be like a product that's based around a completely different point of view, right? That maybe hasn't been spoken about before.
Mm-hmm. Contrarian point of view.
Yeah.
If you can go into that space and shout loudly, 100%.
Yes, exactly.
So at the end of every episode, we ask a series of 6 quick questions, some of which we might have already covered, but some of which we might not have. But I ask them all the same at the very end, and it gets split into the part of the episode. So question number 1 is actually a really nice tie-in from what you were just saying. But what's your why? Why are you doing what you're doing?
For me, it's sort of two-pronged, right? My initial why is I love to experience products that have an impact in the moment that I use them. That for me is like, I love it. That's why I love fragrance, right? It's an instant. When I put it on, it does something to me immediately. And that is as I push, out into all of our products, that's really for me. But lifestyle is such a massive why for me. It's what drives me. I love the idea of a light-filled, happy lifestyle, good work balance, right? And that's my why. That's what I think drives me every day, is because I love so much what I do. And I love continuing to build and create the lifestyle that means so much to me and my family.
Amazing. I love that. Question number 2 is, what's been your favorite marketing moment so far?
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, obviously we talked about our sample collection, which I love, but we had this random one. We did this game event. Oh my God. Can I tell you? It was a wheel. You would spin it and you would have to answer a question. And then if you got the question right, you would win a product. The gaming idea is just so brilliant. People love a game.
People love a game. I love a game. Love a good game.
And that for me, we were at a clean beauty event and everyone was like having these moments of like, hey, discover my brand. And we just did this game wheel and it was just about having fun and like winning, not even, like, it's not like we were giving like hundreds of dollars away. It was like, you can win a sample, you can win a hat, but people just want the game element.
It's like that spin the wheel that's like the Shopify plugin, which people also love, right? Where it's like at the start of your web, like when someone enters your website kind of thing, but you've like brought it into the real world, which is how it used to be. And it makes sense that people love it.
It's also like a connection moment, right? Because you're spinning the wheel and people are cheering and people are watching. They want to see what you win.
It's actually a great idea at an expo or at a booth of some kind, because of course it attracts attention.
And even if you're not interested in what necessarily the brand or the product, you just want to play the game. You're just like, yeah, okay, I want to do it. And if people are excited and cheering, so that's, it brings me back to like our 2-Up days in Sydney in pubs, right? I loved those. Oh my God, it was my most favorite.
Lots of vibes.
Yes. So probably that today.
I love that. That's so much fun. We need more of those around the place. Everyone listening, create a wheel, have it at your booth.
A game moment.
Create a game. Question number 3 is, what's your go-to business resource when it comes to book, newsletter, or podcast?
I mean, it's really basic. It's like Google. I Google everything to start. That's what like my everything, I start there, because when I Google it, what I love about it, it's so terrible. I feel like I'm like advertising to them. It's, it leads you to the podcast, to the book, to the thing that maybe you kind of can spiral down. Like I also listen to How I Built This, which is, for me, I really listen to it, and I'm assuming it's like this podcast, why people listen to it. It's more about hearing a story that you're like, oh, okay, I can keep going now. I've heard that story.
Totally. Everyone goes through something. It all starts from the place of an idea, and you realize that you're not alone when you're having those really shitty days and you're like, why?
Yeah, and that the no's are not the end, right? That's the most important. I think every entrepreneur wants to hear that. You're like, oh, okay, you got massively rejected. You lost a bunch of money. You did this, you did that, but it ended up guiding you to where you are now.
Entrepreneurship is really just a series of rejections and disappointments, and you just get better at dealing with it.
Yes, I think that's why actors always end up with like entrepreneurs. Like later in life, they're always like, "Oh, she married the billionaire of blah 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 blah," and I'm like, "What?" That's because they're both two people that are massively familiar with rejection.
Yeah, 100%. Question number 4 is, how do you win the day? What are your AM and PM rituals and habits that keep you feeling happy and successful and motivated?
So working out for me has become like an addiction. Much more later, so in life than before. But working out is like it sets me up for the day. It makes me like want to get dressed, want to put on makeup, want to put on my perfume in a whole new way. And I hate to say it, but in the evenings it's really alcohol. Not even lots. I just love. It's honestly, it's like it just sort of puts a full stop. Like even when I'm working, just one glass of wine to come. It's sort of, you're all up here in crazy days, and that glass of wine just allows me to really kind of reset. And I'm a meditator, don't get me wrong, but it's harder sometimes to find the time to do that than the other things. I don't know why. And working out is like a level of meditation for me.
Same. I agree. Question number 5 is, what's the worst money mistake you've had in the business and how much did it cost you?
I've probably had a few, honestly. You know what it is? It's not that it was such a massive amount of money. My biggest mistakes, and even if I would do it now, I would still be the mistake, is when I try and throw money at a situation. It's always a disaster, because what it generally does is it pulls, when you're growing a business, you have your hand in everything all the time. And sometimes when I get to a challenging moment, like growing retailers or marketing or whatever, and I'm just like, okay, clearly I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to pay this company, or I'm going to pay this person to just do it. It always ends up costing me a fortune. And I'm like, that was a disaster. No, it takes your sort of, personal touch out of it. Like you always collaborate with them. But that for me is every time I've done it, even with an employee, anything where I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to pay someone a big fat salary and they're just going to take over the marketing side of my company. I'm like, that person was a disaster.
It's definitely, you want the magic fix. You want the magic bullet, and 9 times out of 10, although I actually still think, because I've done this so many times as well, and I've talked about this on the show a few times, it's like worth keeping on trying though, because the time that it hits and it's really worth the money and you're like, oh, okay, this is great.
Yeah, and I think what is the point of difference is when you are strategically looking for your next step, as opposed to generally feeling like, I don't know how to get out of the situation, or I don't know how to jump to that next level. I'm just going to throw money at the situation, right? So if I'm strategic about it, where I'm like, even if it ends up costing you the same, but you're like, this is thought through. I want to get to, like, you have your plan of where you want to get to. Then you can pull in the right people, the right partners. But sometimes when you don't know where you want to get to, but other than success, that's where it gets real shaky. And for me, that's always been I'm like, why the hell did I do that? I don't know why. I just
100%. I'm sure there are so many people listening right now that are nodding their head being like, I'm with you. I've been there.
Yeah, and it's really, I think for people when they're starting their company, it's like, okay, I have a product. I want to get it into 25 stores, right? Or I want to get it into 50 stores. I'm just going to hire someone to do that for me. No, that is going to be the disaster of your life.
Do it yourself. Yeah.
Yes, you have to start it. And then you can be like, you know what? Now I know what got it in, what got it out, working. That's where I think is always the hardest thing.
100%. It's also the case for ads in today's landscape. I think people often jump to being like, oh, like ads, I'm just going to invest a buttload of money into ads and it's going to work. And it's like, actually, in today's landscape, it's not going to work. Maybe TikTok, maybe TikTok's like the new Instagram ad kind of landscape, but like Facebook and Instagram has changed so drastically.
Yeah, and it's it used to be so it felt. I remember when it first all started, and I was like, dude, it just feels too easy. Like nothing is going to stay like that, and of course it hasn't. And even with those campaigns like Facebook and all that, there is huge amounts of strategy and creativity and that goes into those campaigns, right? Like you can't just be like, oh, here's a 50 grand, 10 grand, whatever, and just run an ad. You've really got to know what you want to get across, how you're talking about your brand, who you want to talk to. It's like running an ad on TV now. It's, there's got to be a lot of process behind it and care, and yeah, it's a lot.
100%. 100%. Okay, last question. Question number 6. What's just a crazy story in the business, good or bad, that you can share?
I mean, my craziest story is actually what we already spoke about. I always think about this where in 2008, where I literally thought everything was going to shit. And I was like, that's it. We're done. We have like no stores. No one's really buying the product. I'm going back to makeup full time. I'm done. And then it just opens up some new arena of just someone saying, hey, have you thought of doing fragrance? And I'm like, you're out of your mind, woman. What are you talking about? That to me is just, it's such, every time I hit like a rough patch, I always think, okay, you just got to think to yourself, it's going to be okay. It's not going to be maybe what you thought it was going to be, but it's going to be okay. And that story to me is just sort of, it's like my driving force every day.
It's kind of weird to think like you just had this strange passing comment that really could have just been forgotten in the moment and just, move on. But it planted this seed and it changed the direction of your business and ultimately the course of your life. And these weird moments that they can make or break your path kind of thing. It's kind of weird.
And I think what makes them so brilliant, right, as much as we all are really impatient, is that you don't see where it's going to go, right? Because it would change everything that you did. That's what's so sometimes about that whole like trusting the process. It's like, right now or whenever anything's happening, you can't see where the silver lining is coming from. Just you've got to trust and know that it is somewhere, but where you just don't know. But that is what is so crazy about all of the risk that you take, right? Everything that you do is a minor risk that way. So
this has been so cool, Rosie. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your journey in creating by Rosie Jane. I've loved chatting with you. Loved hearing your Aussie accent.
Yeah, I know. Thank you so much for having me. I always feel so strange when I'm talking only about myself in a conversation. But it was so lovely to meet you as well. And I love that we're like two Aussies on here. It's so random, right? I'm like, you're in London and I'm in LA, but we're both from Sydney. That seems crazy.